It was one of the most gut-wrenching moments of my life, realizing that the two people I loved most, my husband and my sister, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. For years, I had trusted them completely, never once doubting their loyalty. But everything shattered when I discovered the truth. My husband had been having an affair with my sister. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'm 36, and after 3 years of divorce, I'm still haunted by the memory of how my world came crashing down. My ex-husband, Caleb, also 36, had a relationship with Alyssa, my 32-year-old sister. That affair tore apart everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. Caleb and I had met at a party through mutual friends, and our connection was instant. From that moment, we began a relationship that lasted for years. Eventually, he proposed, and we got married. I thought we had the perfect marriage, but the reality was far darker. It was 5 years into our marriage when I learned about the affair. Caleb and Alyssa's bond wasn't some sudden thing that came out of nowhere. It had been there, hiding in plain sight. Their first meeting was just months into Caleb and my relationship. I remember it so clearly, introducing him to my family over dinner. By that time, Caleb and I were serious, and I wanted my family to get to know him. I had already met his family, just his parents, since he was an only child. But I had a large family, and I was the middle child. The oldest was Chris, the only one I still speak to. Caleb got along with everyone right away, but he and Alyssa hit it off the most. Their conversations seemed endless, about books, TV shows, and even the food they both loved. They connected so effortlessly, and I thought it was sweet. Little did I know, that bond would become something far darker. They became close friends, and I was thrilled that Caleb was blending so well with my family. At the time, Alyssa and I were also close. Being just a few years apart, we often hung out together, sometimes even double dating with our respective partners. We had a lot of fun, laughing and joking, and everything seemed perfect. Alyssa had a few short relationships while Caleb and I were together, always bringing a new guy to our double dates. She would tease me, saying she wished Caleb had a sibling so she could date him instead. Looking back now, it's almost as if she was planting seeds for something that would later destroy me. She would often tell me how lucky I was to have Caleb. How perfect he was. I never thought anything of it. To me, it was just a compliment. But what I didn't see, what I couldn't even fathom, was that her words weren't just praise. They were hints, signals of something far more insidious. I had no reason to question her intentions, because I trusted her. No, I loved her like a sister. I never imagined that behind my back, she could be plotting to take everything from me. When Caleb proposed and we got married, Alyssa was overjoyed. In fact, she was my maid of honor. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. But what I didn't know was that behind the smiles, behind the vows, she was already deep in an affair with him. Years passed, and life went on, or so I thought. Our marriage seemed solid, despite the occasional bumps, like Caleb wanting kids when I wasn't ready or him wishing I'd scale back my career. I was an investment banker, working hard for my dreams. Caleb worked in marketing, but he wasn't as passionate about his job as I was about mine. That created tension, especially when he didn't understand why I couldn't just relax and spend more time with him. But for me, it wasn't a choice. Our lifestyle depended on my income. I couldn't just stop working. And as for having children, that was a non-negotiable for me. I wasn't ready, mentally or emotionally. I had always been clear about it, but Caleb thought time would change my mind. I couldn't give him what he wanted, but I always made it clear that I wasn't going to do something I wasn't prepared for. Yet, despite these disagreements, I never doubted his loyalty. We fought, yes, but we always made up. It was the ebb and flow of marriage until it wasn't. A week after our 5th anniversary, the rug was pulled out from under me. That's when I found out the truth about Caleb and Alyssa. On our anniversary, Caleb had been sweet, loving, and completely engaged with me. He acted as if I was the only person in the world who mattered to him. But that charade crumbled in the days that followed. I was going through my wardrobe one day, when I stumbled upon something that would change my life forever. I was rummaging through my wardrobe, searching for something specific, but no luck. It wasn't there. Frustrated, I decided to check Caleb's wardrobe. I can't even remember exactly what I was looking for, but there was this blazer I needed for a work event coming up, a very particular one. I thought maybe I'd accidentally mixed it up with his clothes. So, I began scanning through his things. And that's when my hand brushed against something strange at the very back of the wardrobe. A bag. Curious, I pulled it out. What I saw next left me breathless. The bag was stuffed with women's clothes. I stood frozen. It took a moment for the realization to hit me. I'd seen these clothes before. They belonged to Alyssa, my sister. It felt like the ground beneath me vanished. I was trapped in a state of disbelief. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, but none came. How could this be happening? I didn't know what to think or do next. I had never gone through his phone. I trusted him. And Alyssa, too. It just wasn't something we did. We had never given each other a reason to doubt one another. But now I felt like I had no choice. If I asked him about the clothes, he could easily come up with an excuse, hide the truth. So, I reached for his phone. I knew the password, and at that moment, it felt like the only way forward. I opened his messages with Alyssa. At first, they seemed innocent enough, harmless small talk. But as I scrolled up, my heart sank. The tone of their messages, it wasn't friendly. They were flirting, getting intimate, making plans. My stomach twisted as I realized the depth of their betrayal. All the late nights he'd been working now made sense. The affair wasn't recent. This had been going on for months. Coincidentally, that day, Alyssa had come over for lunch. The two of them, so brazen, so careless, didn't even try to hide it from me. The timing couldn't have been worse. I had them both in the house, the evidence clear and undeniable. I confronted them right then and there. I showed them the texts, the bag of clothes. And what did they say? They didn't apologize. They didn't deny it. They simply told me that it wasn't my business. They were calm, almost detached, as if what they were saying was perfectly reasonable. But this was my business. How could they say otherwise? I had to fight to keep my composure, but I couldn't hold back. I screamed. I demanded answers, but they didn't flinch. Caleb had the audacity to tell me that since I hadn't given him a child and didn't spend enough time with him, he had to look elsewhere. It was the ultimate hypocrisy. He had no regard for the sacrifices I made, for the life I worked so hard to build. Alyssa, too, had the gall to suggest I should be grateful. Grateful that Caleb kept it in the family, as though that was somehow better than him cheating with someone else. The audacity! She said it would have been more embarrassing if he'd gone elsewhere, as if their affair wasn't already a nightmare. They didn't even seem ashamed. They told me they weren't hiding anything anymore, there was no point. The secret was out. They had only kept it from me to avoid drama, and now that I knew, there was nothing left to hide. Their cruelty hit me like a brick. Alyssa was planning on moving away soon, taking her promotion in Pennsylvania, and Caleb would follow. It was all mapped out. The affair was no longer a secret, and they had no plans to stop. It was a twisted, sickening display of betrayal, and I felt powerless. But I refused to let them see the depths of my pain. I filed for divorce. And when I told my parents, the reaction was swift. They cut Alyssa off. Chris, my brother, stopped speaking to her entirely. No one from our family had anything to do with her anymore. And you know what? She didn't seem to care. She moved away to Pennsylvania, as planned. 3 months later, Caleb followed suit. He didn't contest the divorce. He left it all to me. I guess he figured that since he was now with Alyssa, he wouldn't need to worry about money. She had been promoted, after all. He wouldn't need my wealth to support his lifestyle anymore. I was relieved. The quicker it was over, the better. I got my freedom. And the divorce process was as smooth as it could be under the circumstances. Since then, there's been no word from Alyssa. No one knows where she is or what she's up to. I don't want to know. I've healed as much as I can. I've built a life after everything. But then, a couple of days ago, I got a call. It was Caleb, using a number I didn't recognize. I hadn't changed my number in years. I should have ignored it. I should have hung up the moment I heard his voice. But curiosity got the better of me. He sounded desperate, upset. And so I listened. It was a call that shocked me. He asked for my help, something so unexpected, so audacious, given that we hadn't spoken in years. And not only that, we hadn't exactly parted on the best of terms. Yet, there he was, no apology, no pretense, just straight to the point. He told me that Alyssa had been in a horrific car accident weeks ago, one that left her unable to move. She had fractured both of her legs and suffered deep bruising to her arms. They had a 2-year-old son, and now, with Alyssa bedridden, it was all on him. He told me that he had tried reaching out to friends for help, but everyone was either too busy or unwilling to take on such a heavy load. He was stretched thin, balancing work and the overwhelming task of caring for his wife and child. There was no way he could handle it on his own. They had considered hiring a full-time nurse, but their finances were tight. The area they lived in was expensive, and the cost of help was simply out of reach. His family had been called upon for assistance, but that too had fallen through. My parents were too old, unable to help, even if they wanted to. His in-laws were out of the picture too, with his father-in-law passing away just a year prior, and his mother-in-law living in Canada. Even Chris, who they had hoped would step in, had flatly refused, choosing to stay as far away from them as possible. With no one left, they were practically begging me to help. And that's when it hit me. After all the years of hurt, after everything they had done, they were now in desperate need, and they had the audacity to come to me. I had held it in for so long, but now, finally, I had my moment. I told him, cold and detached, that I couldn't help. It wasn't my business, and that was all there was to say. Without further explanation, I ended the call and blocked the number. There was no reason to get into the details, no reason to dwell on it. Chris thinks I did the right thing. But my parents? They don't see it that way. They think 3 years is long enough to get over what happened, especially since Alyssa is going through something so tragic. They expect me to forgive, to move on. But how can they not see it from my perspective? I'm not the one who should be expected to forgive, at least, not yet. They insist I'm being selfish, stubborn even, for not considering it. But I stand firm. Why should I be the one to shoulder this burden, after everything that happened? Yes, I feel for their child. I truly do. But at the end of the day, that child isn't mine. It's not my problem. They want me to be the bigger person, but why should I? After everything, they expect me to jump back in. Days have passed, and my parents keep pushing, nagging at me, making me second-guess myself. Am I being too harsh? Should I reconsider, for the sake of the child? I don't know, but I'm still standing firm. I'm not going to let them make me feel guilty for their choices. Update 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who took the time to comment. Your words really meant a lot. As for my decision, it stands. I'm not changing my mind. My parents can think whatever they want about me, but they have no say in how I feel. I'm the one who was hurt, and I'm the only one who gets to decide how I process that. They don't get to dictate my feelings. I do. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel bad about their son, yes. But that doesn't mean I have to become their solution. They've made their choices, and they can deal with the consequences. If they feel bad enough, they should be stepping up, not trying to pass the responsibility on to me. They aren't that old. They're in their early 60s. They can do more than they're letting on, but they don't want to. Instead, they expect me to clean up their mess. When I told them I wouldn't change my mind, they were livid. They told me they were cutting ties with me. Apparently, I was being selfish and stubborn. But I didn't care. They had their chance to do right by me, and they blew it. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. Simple as that. I haven't spoken to Chris about it yet, but I'm sure he'll back me up. He's been busy with work lately, but when we do talk, I'm confident he'll agree. And honestly, until then, I'm fine with my decision. I don't know what will happen with Alyssa and Caleb or their son, but that's not my problem to fix. Update 2. It's been over a month now, and Caleb has tried multiple times to get in touch with me. Since I blocked him, he hasn't been able to reach me. But I've heard from Chris that they've been trying to get in touch with him too. Even Alyssa has sent him messages, but he's just ignoring them. He's left them all on read. I spoke to him recently, and he told me he's made the decision not to keep in touch with our parents anymore either. They've been unreasonable, selfish, and it's ironic, really. After accusing me of being selfish, here they are, stranded, with no one left to rely on. They're alone now, and they don't even have Chris to turn to. They still have a chance to make things right with Alyssa, but I don't think they will. It's unlikely, because my parents have always been the type to say they love their family, but when it comes down to it, they won't lift a finger to help. I've seen it firsthand. They couldn't be bothered to help Chris when his son was injured, and that's just one example. There was another time when Chris asked them for financial help when his business was struggling. They turned him down too. So, why should I expect anything different now? They've shown who they are. And I'm done playing their game. It's been a struggle from the start, and yet, despite everything, I still find myself reflecting on a decision that seemed so clear-cut at the time. Chris had asked his parents for help, for support, a simple gesture of kindness to assist his son in regaining movement after his wrist was freed from the cast. But the response he received was chilling in its indifference. They refused him. Coldly. Their excuse? They were getting older, they needed to save for their future. Money wasn't something they could just give out, no charity here, not even for their own family. Chris respected their decision. He didn't argue. But I couldn't help but feel a simmering frustration. It seemed so selfish, so detached. And yet, what surprised me even more wasn't the refusal, it was the realization that it was the same story again. Still no help for their grandkids. As I'd expected, honestly. They'd shown no interest in their family's struggles in the past, so why would they now? And then, the inevitable happened. Chris and Alyssa reached their breaking point. It wasn't a surprise to me that they decided to cut ties. It seemed only fair. If they wouldn't help, why should they expect to be a part of their grandkids' lives? If they refused to help their children, they couldn't demand a relationship with their grandchildren. That's how I saw it. But, I guess, that's just my perspective. A part of me, despite everything, still hoped for a resolution. I dislike Alyssa, that's true, and Caleb? Even more so. But as much as I've tried to distance myself from them, I can't deny the human part of me. There's a small voice that hopes things improve for everyone. Family dynamics are so complicated, and for all the wrongs done to me, I don't have it in me to wish ill upon them. It's not in my nature. When Chris reached out to them a couple of weeks ago, I was bracing for the worst. But the story that unfolded wasn't what I expected. Alyssa spoke of their dire circumstances, the ones that painted a picture of desperation. They were struggling to make ends meet. The daycare bills for their son were draining them dry, and they couldn't even manage a normal daily routine without financial stress weighing on them. The cost of living in their neighborhood was high, and the idea of commuting every day for work was simply out of the question. Caleb had his job, Alyssa couldn't even manage the basics anymore. On top of everything, rent was overdue. They were at risk of losing their home. A sympathetic landlord had given them a few extra months, but the clock was ticking. They needed the money, and they had no idea where to turn. So Alyssa had asked for help, but again, the answer was no. Our parents had refused, their rationale being that they needed to save for their own future needs. I get it, I do. Saving for a rainy day is essential, but this wasn't some distant problem. This was their own daughter and her child in crisis. They had the means, but they still said no. And it wasn't just that, they acted like it was somehow a personal affront. Why did they treat us this way? Why was money so sacred to them, yet so easily denied when it was their family in need? Then came Alyssa's breaking point. After another refusal, she snapped. She made it clear that she was cutting them out of her life for good. She was done with them, refusing to speak to them ever again. As much as I dislike her, I couldn't help but understand her decision. Toxicity is a two-way street, and it wasn't just Caleb and Alyssa who were guilty of it. Our parents had their fair share of blame. It's almost a miracle that Chris and I turned out as we did, considering the environment we were raised in. Now, it seems, there's no coming back from this. Our parents won't have access to their grandchildren anytime soon. If ever. And they have nobody but themselves to blame. The ties have been severed, and I can't say they didn't deserve it. If anything, I feel a strange sense of closure now. No more reaching out, no more trying to mend what can't be fixed. The conversation with Chris didn't end there. We spoke about what should come next. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that if he wanted to help them, I wouldn't stand in his way. My conscience wouldn't let me, but at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to engage with them anymore. I've done my part, or at least I tried. But this situation is too far gone for me. Chris told me that, for now, he's kept his distance from Alyssa. The hurt is too raw. But as a father, he couldn't ignore his nephew's suffering. That, above all else, hit home. Even with everything that's happened, he knew his nephew didn't deserve to suffer. So, despite everything, he decided he would help. He would send money every month until they could stand on their own again. I wasn't angry with Chris for his decision. In fact, I was glad. He was doing the right thing. He was helping where others had failed to step up. He was doing what I couldn't, and I respected that. It's a complicated thing, family. For all the wrongs done, there are moments when you have to rise above it all. And as hard as it was, I knew he had to do what he felt was right. But as for me, I'm done with them. I'm not moving on from the past. I'll never forget how they treated me. But I'm ready to move forward without them in my life. This is the closure I needed. Even during the divorce, I hadn't felt free. But now, I can finally breathe. I'm focusing on myself, on my work, on the things that matter. I don't need to deal with toxic people anymore. I'm no longer in touch with my parents, and I'm okay with that. Life's too short, and I have too much to live for. So, I'll be fine. Thank you for following my story and supporting me through this. It means more than you'll ever know.